Hello and welcome to everybody listening to this video lecture. This lecture is brought to you by Studental. My name is Dr. Vaibhav Garg, and for today's topic we have chosen intracanal medicaments. It's a very important question pertaining to the final year endodontic exams. So let's quickly see what all we have in today's lecture. We will have a brief introduction, the ideal requirements for intracanal medicament, indications when they should be used, how they are classified, the topics of concern, the method of application of these medications, and finally the conclusion. So biomechanical preparation or instrumentation and irrigation with an antimicrobial solution are essential for disinfection of pulp space. As we all know, these techniques are commonly used. Biomechanical instrumentation, or in current times we call it cleaning and shaping, is essential for conducting a root canal therapy. But what happens is sometimes these techniques or irrigation methods do not completely eradicate microorganisms from the necrotic pulp space. So what happens? The chances of reinfection becomes more in case these bacterial toxins are left over or bacteria is there still persisting within the canal space. So further disinfection has been suggested, and it is necessary for removal of these microorganisms from the deep areas of root canal anatomy where these bacteria can persist and thrive to ensure the success of endodontic treatment that we have given to the patient, and it prevents reinfection. So commonly ideal requirements that are given by Grossman, I'm just enumerating few of them. It has to be an effective antimicrobial agent. It should be non-irritating to the periradicular tissue or periapical tissue. It should be stable when it is in solution form. It should have a prolonged antimicrobial effect. It should be active in the presence of blood, serum, and protein derivatives of the tissues. It should have low surface tension because of low surface tension, application is easy and larger areas are covered with the material or intracanal medicament. It should not interfere with the repair of periradicular tissue also. It should not stain the tooth structure, and it should not induce a cell-mediated immune response. For clinical side, I want to say as a clinician that the material should be inexpensive also. It is one of the prime concerns of a clinician that whatever intracanal medicament we are using, it should not be very expensive during the application or to purchase. Also, when you buy it, it should have a long shelf life. Also, it should be very easy for application and for handling purposes. And once the treatment is over and intracanal medicament has to be removed from the pulp space, it should be very easy to remove it also. Some indications were given by Chong and Pitford. So let's quickly revise what all indications are there for intracanal medicament or when we actually use them. They are commonly used for persistently wet canals, so that they can be dried up, or what we commonly say the weeping canals, to eliminate any remaining microbes in the pulp space, to render root canal contents inert. That means they should be converted inactive if at all they are present, to neutralize tissue debris, and to act as a barrier against leakage for an intra-appointment dressing in symptomatic cases. That means a physical barrier, a chemical barrier, and a biological barrier should be there. Once there are different appointments of root canal treatment, and in between those appointments, there should not be any leakage from the saliva or the intraoral fluids that are present. So commonly, how they are classified. So a classic way of defining or categorizing all these is given by Grossman. It is called as first is called essential oils, and eugenol is one of the best examples for that. Coming to phenolic compounds, there are phenol. Another part is parachlorophenol, then camphorated parachlorophenol, formoctazole, glutaraldehyde, and quercetin. Also, Halogens are commonly used like sodium hypochlorite and iodide. Potassium iodide is one of the main products. Quaternary ammonium compounds like 9-aminoacridine, calcium hydroxide, the world famous calcium hydroxide, the best one used till date, and N2. Another classification was given by Engel, and he commonly divided two of them as conventional antiseptics or locally used antiseptics and chemotherapeutics. So locally used antiseptics were alcohols, basically ethyl alcohol and isopropyl alcohol, phenolic compounds like phenol, camphorated phenol, monochlorophenol, another derivative of phenol, para-monochlorophenol, thymol, eugenol, and creosote, heavy metal salts like salts of silver, mercury, and copper, cationic detergents like quaternary ammonium compounds, halogens, as we have seen earlier, like sodium hypochlorite and iodine potassium iodide, antibiotics like ladamix paste, ceftomixin fort, Grossman's polyantibiotic paste, also known as PBSC. It is a very famous compound. Mostly teachers know about this topic, and it is a frequently asked Viva question also. So please listen to it and find out what is PBSC. PB is a combination of penicillin, bacitracin, streptomycin with cryolite. Also, another form was made, PBSCN, that also had neomycin that acted as a antifungal agent. Metronidazole, clindamycin, triple antibiotic paste is also a favorite question of examiners, and sulfonamides. So let's quickly revise a few topics that is phenol, eugenol, pomacrozole, and ladamix paste. We are discussing these four topics because they're frequently asked in question in vivas, and it's a favorite question of discussion. But right now, in current scenario or in contemporary endodontics that we actually do in this era, these four products are not used anymore because of the toxicity or the higher levels of what you say tissue response. And the when you compare the toxicity and mutagenicity of these products, the efficacy as an antibacterial is very low in comparison to the toxicity that is available. So these products are not used anymore, but yes, they are point of concern and we should actually revise them. So let's quickly revise what phenols are. Phenols, also known as carbolic acid, have been used for the longest time in dentistry. They are the best, they were considered as the best antimicrobial agents that were available. What we say about phenol is that phenol along with other products like chlorophenol or monochlorophenol, these products were actually provided as 10% concentration. That was sufficient for us. Or they're more effective within the very limited 1 or 2% concentration. But when we go for higher concentration, the toxicity increases, but the efficacy reduces. So it doesn't act like an antimicrobial anymore. And also tissue toxicity was very, very high. So that's why phenols were reduced. You have seen the product here on the right side, as you see, camphor monochlorophenol. That means camphorated products of phenols were used. Camphorated, what it helps is when camphoration of a phenol product is done or a phenolic product is done, it reduces the dispersion of the product, and it helps the slow dispersion of material. That's why for a longer acting time, these products can be used. But right now in current scenario, these products are not used. Eugenol has been in all parts of dentistry in the world for the very long time. It is one of the essential oils and has been is a household product also. So household medication it can be used. Very commonly used word is obtundent effect. That means it reduces the amount of pain that immediately that occurs in acute cases, or when the patient is actually suffering from severe pain. A simple dab of eugenol oil can help. But obtundent effect is not sufficient to prove its antimicrobial activity. As we all know, when just the obtundent effect, it was the purpose. It used to fix the product, the acute part of the pain. Apart from it, eugenol doesn't prove its antimicrobial activity anymore. So now it actually causes toxicity of the periradicular tissue, in higher concentrations, and that's why it is not recommended. Coming to formocresol, formocresol is formaldehyde and cresol part. So formaldehyde is sufficient when it is used in pathology for fixing of the samples. Only 10% was sufficient. But in dentistry, when formocresol is used, it is one of the most widely used products across all levels of dentistry in endodontics. It's one of the most common antimicrobial agents that is even used today. But it is not recommended. I'll tell you why. What happens when formocresol, as I previously told you that 10% is sufficient to fix the tissue. In the formocresol combinations that are available for dentistry start from 19% to 37%. So that means a lot of formocresol is percentage wise, it is highly available. Another product was tricresol formaldehyde that had more than 90% of formocresol and 10% tricresol. So in such higher concentrations when formocresol is used, it has been seen under studies that the amount of formocresol available in the dental medication or the formulations, it has to be reduced to at least 1024 times. Then only it will become non-active or non-toxic. So reducing that much quantity is not done in daily practices, and a very high volume is available. So studies have proven the toxicity, mutagenicity, and carcinogenic effects of formocresol, and it is not used in dentistry anymore. In in America, if this product is used, the dentist can actually can go for a legal case and for unwise decision for using a formocresol. So mostly none of the dentistry people in endodontics right now in the modern world do not recommend formocresol use. Coming to leather mix space, it is also one of the famous questions for most of the examiners. It was first introduced in 1960s, and it was um, chemically available, or it was available for dentistry in 2000 in 1962. So it's a combination of three. It's a combination of uh, what we say a corticosteroid or a cortisone or a hydrocortisone along with a tetracycline level of antibiotic. So it was a combination of a corticosteroid and an antibiotic. What happened is, in most of the cases, it was a good combination of um, having a corticosteroid that is frequently used in cases with higher amount of pain or cases with over preparation or mid treatment flare up. That means when the root canal was started, uh, after the first appointment is over, the patient is having even more pain than the previous appointment. The patient has higher amount of pain, or when the vital cases were started or acute cases with vital pulp were started, it is not recommended for necrotic cases. It was recommended for vital pulp cases. So when vital pulp cases were done, or when there was over instrumentation of the cases, when you used to apply leader mix space, it used to give relief to the patient because of the combined effect of corticosteroid and antibiotics. So mostly antibiotics, tetracycline compounds were used, and dexamethasone was used as part of the corticosteroid. But right now it is not used in part of dentistry. So let's move on to the main concern or topics or significance. One is calcium hydroxide, another is chlorhexidine digluconate, and triple antibiotic phase. So these are the three favorite topics of teachers. Coming to calcium hydroxide, it was almost 100 years back that Hermann introduced calcium hydroxide in 1920. It has a unique ability to repair and stimulate hard tissue formation. Uh, why calcium hydroxide is famous? Because calcium hydroxide has a very high alkaline pH, around 12.5, and it brings antibacterial properties because of the release of hydroxyl ions in the aqueous environment. So when there is some moisture available and calcium hydroxide is there, hydroxyl ions are released. So what happens? Hydroxyl ions are free radicals, are highly oxidant free radicals, and they show extreme reactivity to several biomolecules. This reactivity is high and indiscriminate. That means it doesn't differentiate between two types of bacteria. It is of a poly microbial level, and free radicals are there, and it reduces the uh, it diffuses into the tissue. So what happens is calcium hydroxide. Let's see a flow chart how the lethal effect of hydroxyl ion is given. So what happens is when a hydroxyl ion is released, it damages the cytoplasmic membrane of the bacteria. It also denatures the protein and damages the DNA that is present. So let us see how these three different things are happening, how the damage of cytoplasmic membrane is happening, what happens to proteins and they get denatured, and what level of DNA damage is happening. So bacterial cytoplasm possesses important function to the survival of the cell, as we all know. And cytoplasmic membrane has lipopolysaccharides. So what happens is hydroxyl ion induce lipid peroxidation, and it results in destruction of poly and phospholipids, and structural components of the cellular membrane are broken. Why it is important to break this cytoplasmic membrane, or why it is important for calcium hydroxide to work on the phospholipid part, and why it is essential for us on this level. Because when a bacteria is dead, if we consider that any of the antibacterial material that you have used within the canal for disinfection purpose, there must be dead bacteria that is available, and this dead bacteria, that cell wall still is contaminated. It has got phospholipids. So what happens is, uh, we say the bacteria is dead. The uh, bacteriostatic part has happened, and bactericidal action has happened, but still the dead cell wall is present there. So when lipopolysaccharides are broken away, the cell wall is also destroyed, and it reduces the chances of any reinfection. Protein denaturation. Bacterial metabolism is highly dependent on enzymatic activities. As we all know, enzymes have a optimum activity and stability in the narrow range of pH. That means when an enzyme is present within a cell, it has to be within a particular pH. But what happens is, the alkaline pH disturbs the optimum environment for an enzyme, and that's why alkalinization of the ionic bonds happen, and there is breakage of the proteins. It changes frequently. These changes frequently result in the loss of biological activity of the enzymes and disruption of the cellular metabolism. Structure proteins may also be damaged by hydroxyl ions. What happens to the DNA of the bacteria? The hydroxyl ions react with the bacterial DNA and induce the splitting of the strands. That means there's breakage of the entire DNA that happens, and those genes are lost. So that means the bacterial strand will not stand. uh, I mean to say that the same type of bacteria will not be able to reproduce, or it will not happen. Some other gene or some other variant of the bacteria will happen, but not the same type. Also, the DNA replication is inhibited and the cellular activity is deranged. That means a lot of mutation will also happen within the DNA, and because of the lethal reactions of the radicals. So how we place calcium hydroxide, or what are the vehicles that are commonly used? This is a very frequently asked question. It can be asked as an individual question also, that write about the vehicles of calcium hydroxide. So we can, it's a short note. We can write as aqueous, viscous, and oily. Fava in 1991 gave us the ideal varieties of how an ideal vehicle should be. So the ideal vehicle should allow gradual and slow release of calcium and hydroxyl ions. It should allow the slow diffusion into the tissue with low solubility in tissue fluids. Should not have any adverse effect on induction of hard tissue deposition. So, for example, coming to aqueous, water soluble. These are water soluble with high degree of solubility within the fluids. So, what all mediums are used? Water, saline can be used. dental anesthetics with or without vasoconstrictor can be used. Why we should consider dental anesthetics? And because these are one of the highest disinfected, or what we say sterile liquids frequently available within the clinic. So this has been used. Ringer solution, aqueous suspension of methyl cellulose or carboxymethyl cellulose. Why these methyl cellulose combinations? Because these are available with us in form of ear drops. So if ear drops, if you see commonly available artificial tears or any eye drops that has antibiotic effect in it, these are sterile liquids. These are easily available across all pharmacies, and that can be used. Coming to examples, Apexel, Pulpadent, and Calacept are examples. In India that I am using clinically is one of the products I'll show in further slides. You please make a mark that these slides are for education purpose only. So whatever product is available in your vicinity of the clinic, because right now in 2020 when we are giving this lecture, certain products are available in the form of calcium hydroxide with aqueous or water-based solution. In future the companies may change or the product variety may change, so don't worry. Use it according to the availability of the product within your premise or with your within your college or your dental clinic or hospital. uh, from a clinical standpoint of view, why these are not very famous, or what is the only disadvantage that we see towards aqueous products is that multiple or re-dressings have to be done several times to achieve the desired effect of. What is the desired effect? There has to be reduction in the periapical lesion. There has to be some hard tissue formation. There has to be complete disinfection, and patient symptoms should have been reduced. So all these four uh, effects that we want from our intracanal medicament, for achieving these four results, multiple appointments have to be given. So that is the only disadvantage that we come across. Apart from it, no other disadvantages have been seen. They are easily removable because they're water soluble. They are easily removable from the canals. They do not discolor the canal. Coming to viscous, these are water soluble substances that release calcium hydroxide and hydroxyl ions more slowly for extended periods, and they promote lower solubility compared to aqueous, probably because of their higher molecular weights. So what happens is, with the higher molecular weight, it reduces the dispersion of calcium hydroxide into the tissue and maintains the paste in the desired area for longer intervals. It is through this mechanism these pastes remain in direct contact with the vital tissue for extended interval of time. For example, glycerine, polyethyl glycol, and propylene glycol. These three are the best examples for using vehicles, and they are easy to mix the calcium hydroxide with them, and even removal of calcium hydroxide will be easier when these vehicles are used. Coming to oily vehicles, these are non-water soluble substances that promote the lowest solubility and diffusion of the paste within the tissue. So when these oily vehicles should be used? These are used when you're looking for a very long-term intracanal medicament. That means I have done a root canal treatment for a patient. The patient is not available because of lack of time or for some other reasons. Patient is not available for 3 to 4 months time, or maybe up to 6 months time, or in cases when we have to the patient cooperation is not available, as in case of older patients that are non-ambulatory, or when you are seeing uh, young young patients. So what happens is, their formation of apex has not happened, and you want to make sure that a natural apex formation or apexification is happening, and you want to see the slow growth of hard tissue formation. In those cases, particularly, oily vehicles are used. I'm sure these clinical tips are embedded within the lecture, and that will help you as a clinician also, not just as a student but as a clinician also. So what we see, the examples of oily vehicles are olive oil, silicone oil, or camphor. Some fatty acids like oleic acid, linoleic acid, and isosteric acid are also used. Metapex is a very frequently available product, or Vitapex. These are very frequently available calcium hydroxide products and are used frequently in dentistry. Remember, the only disadvantage of oily vehicles is it is very difficult to remove from the canal. So what are the common formulations that are available? Calcium hydroxide is available as a powder form or as a paste form. Also, we can see calcium hydroxide can be divided as setting calcium hydroxide and non-setting calcium hydroxide. So setting calcium hydroxide are used only in restorative dentistry and not in endodontics. Coming to non-setting paste, Metapex is a frequently used calcium hydroxide with iodoform and um, with oily vehicle. Apart from it, calcium hydroxide has been proven to be the one of the best intracanal medicaments. It gives us desired results. Uh, Apart from oily vehicles, all the other formulations can be easily removed, easily applied. They do not discolor the calcium and the tooth structure, and bring us the desired results of disinfection, root formation. Also, they can be used for diagnostic purpose. I'm talking about today's dentistry, where microscopes and magnification are frequently used and uh, higher variety of diagnostics are done. A very common purpose of calcium hydroxide paste is to see if there is a fracture within the tooth. So what happens is, when you place calcium hydroxide within the canal and you pump it up or you agitate the calcium hydroxide, if there is a fracture that is available, it will be seen both microscopically under the operating microscope that is used in endodontics, or you can see calcium hydroxide in on X-rays also, or radiographs that you take. So it helps us decide that the case what kind of prognosis the case has and how should we follow. So it's a very good diagnostic tool. Please remember, in today's current times, calcium hydroxide can be used as a diagnostic tool also. Let's move to the next slide. Coming to chlorhexidine digluconate, it is recommended both as a root canal irrigant and an intracanal medicament. So commonly it is used as a 2% gel or a mixture with calcium hydroxide. Chlorhexidine has been effective against both E. faecalis, that is a frequently known bacteria in retreatment cases, and Candida albicans also in in vitro studies. So cationic bis biogenides with optimum antimicrobial action ranging from 5.5 to 7 pH. So it's partly alkaline in nature. This antimicrobial activity is attributed to its ability to permeate the microbial cell wall in causing the coagulation of cytoplasmic components. So what happens is, chlorhexidine has some positive or what we say positively charged chlorhexidine molecules. The phospholipids on the cell wall have negative, so it causes the cell lysis in a bigger way. If you see a bigger picture, calcium chlorhexidine digluconate causes cell lysis. So one of the favorite points for calcium chlorhexidine digluconate is its substantiivity. Every examiner asks about substantiivity of chlorhexidine or CHX. So what happens? How it works? So positively charged molecules of chlorhexidine absorbs on the dentine and prevent microbial colonization on the dentine surface for some time beyond the actual medication period. That means if you have applied it for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks time, the actual availability of chlorhexidine onto that dentinal tubule or dentine surface will be over 5 months. So to achieve this substantiivity, fluorine interaction is required for saturation dentine. Thus, along with the irrigation part, chlorhexidine is a very frequently used antimicrobial agent, or as a very famous intracanal irrigant. It has to be used as a gel also. It can be used as a gel if it is available in your vicinity or with your vendors. You should definitely use chlorhexidine as a intracanal medicament. So what studies have showed that 2% chlorhexidine gel is more effective against E. faecalis inside dentinal tubules, and um, it is more effective than a combination of a calcium hydroxide and chlorhexidine mixture, or a calcium hydroxide that has been singularly used or alone. So 0.1% to 2% solutions are available in dentistry, and they're toxically safe. Even higher concentrations, it can be considered safe. Coming to triple antibiotic paste, I must say this is a favorite question. It can come as a short note also, and it is a it is a topic that is so famous with the teachers that even now, as we take lectures, and all the practitioners that are visiting us or seeing us during the lectures, they ask about this particular topic, that is called triple antibiotic paste or modified triple antibiotic paste. So earlier, doxycycline was used as a one of the components. Uh, Now minocycline is used. That is why it is called uh, modified triple antibiotic paste. So what happened? Metronidazole, ciprofloxacin, and minocycline, they are reported to be successful regimen in controlling the root canal pathogens and in managing young permanently. So why metronidazole was used? Because it is the first choice of drug to for obligate and anaerobes. But what happens is it's a polybacterial environment within the canal. So metronidazole is just not enough. So we need two other combinations. So ciprofloxacin and minocycline were actually added to the combination, and a triple antibiotic paste was formed in 1996. So propylene glycol was used as a vehicle. It is used in teeth with immature root development, necrotic pulps, and apical periodontitis. So there was one of the techniques that were developed for for apexification, that is lesion sterilization and tissue repair therapy. So it uses triple antibiotic paste. Other alternatives for apexification, as we all know as students, that calcium hydroxide dressings were used for conducting apexification. In today's modern scenario, MTA is one of the favorite products to create apical plug or apexification in immediate cases within 24 hours or within 7 days. Both slow setting and fast setting MTA can be used. But the only disadvantage that we see in using MTA or using calcium hydroxide is that they do not strengthen the entire root, and the remaining tooth structure doesn't develop on its own. There is a very thin layer of dentine that is only available, and it remains fragile. So in endodontic regenerative procedures, viable tissue is available, or vital tissue what we say, and clinical studies show that if we place triple antibiotic paste, we are seeing higher level of maturation of uh, the tissue. Along with that, the root growth is happening, the root thickness is increasing, and a natural plug or apexification is happening. The only disadvantage triple antibiotic paste has, because it has a tetracycline derivative in the form of minocycline, so it used to discolor the entire tooth if it is visible. So tooth area or the enamel area that we see, or the anatomic crown that we see, it is visible and discolors it. So we have to limit the placement of triple antibiotic paste uh, within the non-visible area, or the only the root surface below where the cementum or below the orifice level. We have to limit our triple antibiotic paste placements. So how these medicaments are applied within the canal, it is a point of concern in clinical application, because what happens is, if we don't know how these things are placed, we will not be able to harness the actual strength of these microbial agents. So let's see how it is done clinically. Uh, as you can see, spiral root fillers in slow speed handpieces, absorbent points or gutta points, hand dreamers in files, and injection systems. So let's see each one of them individually. So coming to spiral root fillers, canals are enlarged, or the biomechanical preparation, or as we say today, cleaning and shaping has been done. So After that, size of the spiral depends on the size of the canal. That means if you have bigger canals or single canals that are huge enough, like distal canals of molars or low of mandibular molars or maxillary molars, palatal canals are there, then you can use, or central incisors in maxilla. So you can use a bigger size of lenticular spirals, or smaller paste is a small amount of paste is applied in these spirals and inserted into the canal. These are the motor started at low speed of around 500 to 600, or a recommended spiral speed has to be used along with the product. To be clearly on this point, different companies make different spirals. That means some companies make lenticular spirals, some companies make paste carriers. They're all um, on the instrument level, they are all same products, but each company has a different amount of material that was used to manufacture these spirals. So they have a recommended speed from 500 to 800 rpm. Please, before using these paste carriers, you should see what manufacturer has told, what speed you have to, what rpm you have to use these uh, lenticular spirals. They can be used on slow speed hand pieces. Um, a new way of lenticular spirals that has come up, or paste carriers, is they are used for application of endodontic sealers also. So you should completely fill the canals, and it should be the spiral has to be moved vertically up and down several times, and you should take a radiograph and see if the entire canal has been packed with the same material. So when you use the spirals for 2 to 3 times, usually they are sufficient. How to use reamers or files? When these when lenticular spirals cannot be used, that means there are fine canals, there are curved canals, or there are unprepared canals, but you still want to place your medication inside. So that time lenticular spirals can cause separation of lenticular spirals, and further iatrogenic errors can happen, like a dominoes effect. So we should not harm the patient at all. If in case the canal has not been prepared or there are fine canals, use an alternative method of placement of the intercanal medicament. You should dip the entire reamer or a file and place it inside the canal anti-clockwise. So when the reamer or the file, it moves anti-clockwise, it coats the sealer on the canal walls, and it does not harm the canal, or it does not engage the dentine, and does not enlarge the canal at all. So your entire purpose is for application of medicament, nothing else. So you can actually use this system, but the only disadvantage is when you are using reamers or files, it is kind of unpredictable. A very less amount of material is placed, or a poorly filled canal has been seen when a radiograph is taken to ensure that the placement has been done. Coming to injection systems, these are the standards, are the gold standards today, and these injection bays have fine needles or plastic needles that we see. So these can be placed as close to the apex as possible, and when you inject the calcium hydroxide paste, these it reaches the nearest to apex, or the area of placement in apexification cases. Also, a good volume is injected. That means less less amount is wasted in mixing or on a glass slab or something, and directly exactly the same amount that you require to fill up the entire canal is injected within the canal space. So needles can be too large, must bind against the canal walls, and could cause force against the paste. So please make sure that when you place the needle inside the canal, it should be passive. It should not engage. So always do it with lot of precaution. If you place lot of material beyond the apex or within the peri-apex of the tooth, it might hurt the patient massively. Also, certain patients complain of extreme pain after the calcium hydroxide paste has been placed. So you have to be very cautious. It is a procedure that can make or break your entire trust with the patient. You have done a very good root canal, you have cleansed it very well, but when you have placed calcium hydroxide inside the canal, you have unwantingly placed it beyond the apex. That causes a lot of pain to the patient. So please don't, please use it wisely. Coming to absorbent paper points or gutta percha points, you can actually place paper points that you just check if the canal is totally dry or moist when the entire cleaning and shaping has been completed, your irrigation protocol has finished. Now you want to place your calcium hydroxide paste or any other intracanal medicament. Use paper points. Paper points should not impinge onto the periapical tissue and should not tightly fit. Make sure there's a slight difference between the end point, or you are using it short of the working length. I would say um, in certain cases when like chlorhexidine gluconate you are using, you just dip the paper point, place it inside and seal the entire canal. Also, GP points is a very convenient method of placing your calcium hydroxide or any other intracanal medicament. Once the entire preparation is over, the master apical GP point that we have chosen, we can take that master cone, we can take, cut it short from 2 apex in the from the last working length, from the entire working length, this last apical part, a shear of 2 mm. Use your GP point as a plunger or a piston. Take your intracanal medicament and just pump it inside the canal. I'm sure you will get good results. It will completely coat the entire canal. It will completely fill the canal, and I hope if your skill is on a good level, you might not push the calcium hydroxide or any other medicament beyond the apex. So please do it safely. Patient can go through a lot of pain when calcium hydroxide medicament as an intracanal medicament is pushed beyond the apex. Please, it's a request. Clinically, it should not be pushed beyond the apex. It can, if it in certain cases it has been seen that if calcium hydroxide has been pushed beyond the apex, or the clinician does not have the right kind of skill of placement of these medicaments, in mandibular molars, if we see the molars are very closely placed to inferior alveolar nerve. So calcium hydroxide being alkaline in nature, if it goes beyond the apex, it can actually cause paresthesia. And surgeries have been done to remove this extra calcium hydroxide material. So please don't do that. If it is used in maxillary teeth, premolars and molars are in very close contact with the vital tissue like the sinus. So when a lot of calcium hydroxide has been pushed, it can actually cause necrosis of the entire sinus lining, and it can be very painful to the patient. So please don't do that. Please use calcium hydroxide medicament or any other medicament with a lot of caution. It is not to be played with. It is a skillful method of placement. So let me show you one more thing, how we use in my we use calcium hydroxide as a blueprint material. The entire preparation is over, and we know that there was slight swelling to the patient. So what we did is we placed the calcium hydroxide inside the canal, and you can see on the right hand side endo activator is there. This endo activator, this is a sonic agitator. It is frequently used in dentistry. So we placed and tried to agitate the entire canal, and you can see we have reached a radiographic image that shows the entire canal anatomy. It shows us the anastomosis, it shows us the apical delta, and it assures that all the parts of the canal has been covered with calcium hydroxide as a intracanal medicament. So it helps me give a blueprint to the entire obturation. Mera obturation, how the obturation will come up in future. It gives me a blueprint of that, and that can be helpful. So this is one of the unique methods of using calcium hydroxide in your clinic. So that gives you assurance that entire BMP was or the cleaning and shaping was uh, as good as possible, that you can clinically do. Irrigation was proper. There was no tissue left. You can see this lateral canal, it is slightly filled with the calcium hydroxide part. That means that area has also been cleaned up. So coming to the conclusion, traditionally root canal treatment was performed with the use of extra disinfecting agents beside irrigants that is used during cleaning and shaping procedure, which mainly aims to reduce or eliminate microorganisms and their byproducts from root canal system before obturation. But teeth with the necrotic pulp, apical periodontitis, and certain conditions like apexification, apexogenesis, root fractures, or weeping canals, they still need they still need more disinfection, and a complete removal is essential of a complete removal of bacteria is essential for getting the desired results of the treatment. So intracanal medicaments ensure us success of the treatment that has been rendered to the patient. And I am sure when you use intracanal medicaments along with your routine procedures like cleaning and shaping and good irrigation, if calcium hydroxide or other intracanal medicaments that are currently available are used judiciously, I can assure you that the success rate will boost to 94%. That means out of 100 cases that you do, 94% patients will never complain of the same tooth again. It will not have reinfection for a very long time. I can assure you that. So these are the basic references. Wien, Grossman, and Engel are standard books to look out for these topics. And if you want to go into more details of these topics, along with that, Principles and Practice of Endodontics by Thorben Webb is also a gold standard book. You should look out for intracanal medicaments in this topic also. I must say, as our famous author Dale Carnegie said, knowledge isn't power until it has been applied. Hope the entire lecture helps you in your future preparations, in your clinical judgments, and uh, let's share this knowledge with other uh, students and other partners that we have in our practices, so that if anything that if even a single slide of this entire presentation helps, it will be helpful for your patients. So be humble, be teachable, and always keep learning. Thank you to all the listeners of this video, and Studental will also bring more lectures, more useful lectures of topic. Please give us a feedback on this topic and other topics of your interest. Uh, Thank you once again.